Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi here, coming to you with our second budget deck for the Wilds of Eldraine set. That's right, the community has spoken. We have already talked about Rat Tribal, so if you're looking for that, be sure to check out our best budget decks playlist. But today we're going to be talking about the close second Faeries. But before we get into all that, thank you to all my new and prior followers on Twitch, helping us get one step closer to affiliate status. And one of those lucky followers picked up 2 starter decks for their arena collection. My next big project here at the Stronghold is going to be to launch a Discord server featuring all sorts of chat channels about deck brewing, meta formats, helping you find a pairing for your own game, as well as channels to simply be social, find help, streaming, and special content. But to make this happen, I'm going to need the help of at least 10 people to step up and make a pledge of $1 or more per month over on Patreon. And hey, for only $1 a month, it's a lot of value, so make sure you're checking it out. And there's even a lot of content there that isn't released anywhere else, even for people who are not supporting on Patreon. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Alright, so on with our favorite, potentially Tourette's-inducing tribal deck of the season. Faeries has so much synergy and so much going for it. Good counter magic, good removal, all within those tribal constraints. The downside here is we're not likely to see a lot of support for this deck over the remainder of the year. I think pretty much all the Faeries cards we can expect are right here, and they gave us a ton of stuff to work with, and at this point it's more about figuring out the right components for the deck, both for a budget version and potentially for a meta version. This one seems to be pretty well embraced by the meta community and has so much potential, but we've got this season to try and get it right, because like I said, we're probably not going to see much more in the way of Faeries for the remainder of the year. But then again, Faeries was an existing deck for the Eternal formats, and we do have 2 years for this deck to remain in Standard. Alright, so let's take a look at my budget version of Faeries, and I want to start off with the land base. Of course, we're running some basics, 9 islands, 7 swamps, and depending upon the choices and rearrangements that you make in your budget version, of course, those numbers will fluctuate a little bit. I'm also putting in a copy of each of the appropriately colored Kamigawa legendary lands. If you don't have them, it's certainly worth considering using a wild card for a single copy of each of those style lands in whatever colors you play most. I think they will definitely be worth the wild card over the course of the next year before they rotate. And of course, those are probably going to continue to see play for a very long time in Eternal, if only as one-ofs. Now, Dark Slick Shores was the appropriately colored rare dual land for this year, and Shipwreck Marsh was last year's free dual land in the starters. And certainly you can upgrade this with other rare dual lands that you already have. But before you consider spending wild cards, certainly give some thought to something like the uncommon Secluded Courtyard from Kamigawa first. This is a very good card for all of the tribal decks that we're going to be looking at. And I think once Ixalan releases, we're going to have something like 10 or 12 potentially relevant tribal decks running around. And dropping a couple wild cards into Secluded Courtyard is going to get you a lot more mileage than a specific 2-color dual land. Similarly, investing a single wild card in something like Thrawn Portal basically would allow you to have a second pain land style card that fits into every single 2 or more color deck that you would run for the next 2 years in Standard and in Eternal long after. Obviously, that is much more versatile than your traditional 2-color rare lands. And now let's go over the main body of the deck, starting with the 1-drops. I'm running 2 copies of Consider. If you were around last year, you got these as free cards, and of course as commons. They're not a bad investment if you don't have it. Probably the best thing a blue deck can be doing on turn 1 as far as preparing for a mid-range game. From there, we've got 2 copies of Sleep Cursed Fairy. If you have them, these are certainly worth testing, but the tempo disadvantage on that might end up being too much for the budget style deck. So I would be very cautious about crafting these unless you are really very experienced with the deck and know that this works for you. The Snare Master Sprite, I'm running a 1-of in here just to test it. I'm not convinced that this is going to make the final cut, but as a common, you almost certainly have a copy here. Ego Drain is another card that I'm not entirely sure about. I'm not sure that this wants to be a discard control deck as much as a counter aggro tempo deck. So again, be cautious in crafting these, but with an uncommon, you probably have a copy or 2 to test out and see what you think about the card. Fairy Dream Thief, I think this is the premier 1-drop fairy creature here. Mostly because of the Surveil 1, that's a very nice trigger to set up your next draw phase. And of course, you know, it's a fairy. And Fairy Fencing is the premier removal spell for this deck. I see no reason to not run 4 of, but 3 is a number that you see very often in the pro versions of decks, so we might come down on that a little bit, or this might be a card that we keep at 4 to take up a space for a rare that we don't have. Speaking of a rare, you might not have Fairy Mastermind. Obviously fits the theme of the deck very, very well, allows you to potentially draw cards. If you have them, it is worth testing them by all means, but I'm not sure I would craft any of these, and certainly not more than 1 until it goes through some pretty significant testing. Fairy Vandal is pretty low-hanging fruit. This was, I think, the 2nd printing on Arena. Certainly fits the theme of the deck very well and can get out of control with the amount of card draw that we have. Make Disappear is last year's Spell Stutter. I don't think it needs a lot of introduction. Even if you don't have one and you have no good way of getting one, crafting one of these is a pretty solid investment for your blue decks. Pick Lock Prankster. Advantage here through the adventure. Mill 4 cards, then put an instant or sorcery or fairy card from the mill cards into your hand. Of course, the others, since they were milled, are in your graveyard. That synergizes very nicely with a card we will talk about in a moment. And of course, this is a 1/3 flying vigilance body that comes down on turn 2 and does a really nice job of blocking up the board and dealing with your opponent's early X1 flyers and things like that. Very, very nice. Spell Stutter Sprite is the counter spell for this deck. This is going to be a 4-of. I really can't see an argument of not running 4 on this, unless we get into something very specific, where we need something like a turn 1 Spell Pierce or something like that. Go for the Throat, Ubiquitous Creature Removal of the non-artifact type. This could be a lot of different versions of the card and might float around a little bit and have a different mix, but 2-drop black removal, going to be pretty solid. Obra, I'm running as a 3 of. This is one of the signature cards. 4 might be the right answer, but we won't actually know until we test it. And I think the distinction there is going to be how much your opponents respect these and remove them, because as a legendary, having a 2nd copy in your hand is a little bit dead unless they deal with your first one. Quick study all about that card draw. There's a lot of 3 mana draw card spells in blue. This one is the common that happens to be in the most recent set, so having 3 of these should be a very easy reach, even for the newer players. And Talon's Messenger, 3-drop, a 1/3, so kind of similar stats to the Pickpocket Prankster. What you get out of this is whenever you attack with 1 or more fairies, draw a card, which will trigger your Vandal, and then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target fairy you control. So this gives you the opportunity to kind of spread the love and diversify your threats across multiple fairies that you're going to have out there. You don't necessarily have to put it on your Vandal. You can put it on your Mastermind or your Prankster that has Vigilance. Lots of good diversity. I want to start with 2 here, but I could see an argument where this goes all the way up to 4. Halo Forger is kind of the sleeper from last year. Of course, a fairy rogue fits thematically in color. It's an aggressive 3/1 stats and evasive. And when it ETBs, you may pay X. When you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from your graveyard. So you are essentially paying for it, but you're paying for it with the Forger as opposed to the card itself. If that spell would be put into the graveyard, exile it instead. So this is what synergizes so well with your Prankster. So maybe a turn 2, turn 3, you free the Fae, mill a couple things, pull a fairy into your hand that you need, leave an instant or sorcery in there, something like Go for the Throat, the Fairy Fencing, even consider Make Disappear. Any of those things could be left in your yard for later use off of the Halo Forger. Unfortunately, Halo Forger doesn't have flash, so those responding spells like Make Disappear, maybe not the thing that you want, but certainly a good way to access or re-access removal in a budget deck. And of course, card advantage again with Spellscorn Cavern. Take It Back is a 3 mana, return a spell to their hand. Maybe next turn you have the mana available or a hard counter, etc., etc. Also, for a 4 mana 2/3, the stats aren't great. Evasive Flying helps. When it ETBs, each opponent discards a card. That could be a very nice thing for that mid game where you're taking their big mana card out of their hand. And again, the numbers will shift on this as we play it, see what works, what doesn't. And of course, don't be afraid to adjust this according to your collection early in the season to save wild cards, etc., etc. I talked about the ones that I think are most worthwhile cards and the ones that I would be hesitant on, but don't be afraid to adjust this list to meet the current state of your collection. and honestly, I think you might be overlooking the value of having a consistent grinder deck that draws in weaker decks, because the whole point of daily grinding is those fast, easy wins. I don't love having Portal as my second. Well, that's an unexpected surprise there. I think we keep Stutter up and maybe Pickpocket. Oh, excuse me, Free the Fae. I can never remember the name of adventures. Okay. Well, actually, am I okay with that? No. Let's say no to that. Sure. I don't love not drawing a land. That is most unfortunate. Scry 2, gain 2. Honestly, don't remember what the creature is on that. But they can't pay the spell stutter. Never seen an enchantments deck quite like this. I think we've got control of the board state here. You can have that target. I'd rather you take that than gain 2. That's a good boy. Need to draw the land though. There we go. got all the mana he could want.
Alright, I think we've ended up in pretty good position here. Yep, we'll say goodbye to that. No Michiko for you. I think he's just a turn behind here. Unless he's got something pretty serious, I think we got him here. I mean, he needs like 3 pieces of removal here just to stabilize. He has land in hand, so I'll just take 4. Cure you on the backswing. Seems pretty solid. Okay. I think that might have been one of last year's starter decks, slightly tweaked. Play a few more hands on this account, and then maybe we switch over to one of the others and play a slightly different version of the deck. consider is worth it. Weird control, maybe? Alright, it resolved. Lovely. The 2. Yeah, I think we have to say no to that. That's a bigger tempo hit for them than it is for us. Kinda hate that. We might have to kill their lifelinker here. I feel like we're in bad shape here. Ooh, that's that could be good. we sneaked. Just got there. I almost got hung up on recasting. And before we go, I want to take just a moment to thank all of my patrons and remind the community when we hit just 10 patrons at any level, we will be rolling out Discord for the entire community, not just paid patrons. So if you have the means or mind to do so, consider supporting our community as it continues to grow. And of course, supporting the community by liking, commenting, subscribing, or sharing our videos is always appreciated. And you will appreciate subbing to the channel so you never miss out on a thing. And of course, we have some suggestions here on the next videos that you're going to want to check out.